My name is Mike Connery, and I'm BetterCloud's VP of Solution and Value Engineering. Now, what we're going to cover today is ultimately how BetterCloud, as the leading SaaS management platform, helps companies deliver on a best-of-breed SaaS strategy. So let's talk for a minute about what exactly that means at a high level and why we're focusing on this. We've done some research over the past 10 years or so. And when we look more specifically at the past 5, what we've seen is a 14x increase in the number of SaaS applications being used in businesses. That's going from an average of 8 apps in 2015, 2016 timeframe, all the way up to 110 apps today. And ultimately, that rapid adoption has given end users at these organizations access to some of the most amazing technology that they could want in their roles. But on the flip side of that, IT teams have actually seen a decrease in terms of the number of IT employees as it relates to the business as a whole. That is sort of at odds and has created this situation where end users are potentially not having the best experience. The company may be more at risk, and IT teams may be struggling with manual, inefficient work. And so ultimately, what we've seen is SaaS management platforms like BetterCloud really enable companies to meet and deliver, as we're going to cover today, on a best-in-breed SaaS strategy. So as we go through the presentation today, I want everyone to consider where they are along their IT journey. And we're going to focus on specifically how IT teams can go from reactive to strategic using BetterCloud. Because ultimately, in going through that journey to meet some of the needs that are coming up in businesses today with this best-in-breed SaaS adoption, becoming a strategic IT team is ultimately going to help you have a greater impact for your end users, reduce the time needed on manual, repetitive work, and lower the risk your business may face. So let's talk a little bit more about what we're going to cover. We're going to look through a couple of trends in IT. We're going to then focus a little bit about how ultimately getting to that strategic IT team goal, going from reactive to strategic, requires the use of a SaaS management platform. And we'll look specifically at how BetterCloud helps you get there. So ultimately, what we've seen is that end users in IT are generally looking for the same 3 things. And that's a strong, good employee experience. That's adhering to a zero trust model and framework. And that's doing so in an efficient way, leveraging automation. What ultimately happens, though, aside from that sort of discrepancy in IT headcount growth that we talked about earlier, is there's really limited tooling to help those trends and help achieve those goals. So what happens is your end users are frustrated, risk is increased, and manual and tedious work is ultimately prevalent across IT teams. So really what we've found is that if you want to create a strategic IT team, a truly strategic IT team, you need to have a SaaS management platform in order to do so. So what we've seen over the past 10 years is that BetterCloud has really helped companies of all verticals, all sizes, any which way you want to slice it, all sorts of companies and businesses use automation to deliver what we've called zero-touch IT operations. And what goes into that and what goes into our SaaS management platform are these 3 buckets. So first is SaaS application discovery. When we talk about that 14x increase in number of applications being used, you need to get your arms around exactly what those apps are. So SaaS app identification and figuring out that footprint of SaaS is absolutely one of the #1 challenges we see customers using BetterCloud to solve. Now, not only understanding what those applications are, but getting proactive about managing those apps. What are the permissions associated with these applications that your end users are installing? Who's got access to them? How frequently are they logging in? Are they redundant with other applications? There's so much that goes into just managing that wealth of apps that exists that you need a platform like BetterCloud to give you that visibility. The next bucket is SaaS user management. Now, typically what we see people coming when they think of user management is they're focused very much on user lifecycle, on the tasks of onboarding, offboarding, and mid-lifecycle management. BetterCloud is absolutely best in class at delivering automation for user lifecycle management. And it goes far beyond simple provisioning and deprovisioning of apps and licenses. True, efficient, strategic IT teams are taking care of so much more than just app creation and deletion. And we'll dig into a little bit more about that in a moment. And finally, SaaS data security. You've got your users, you've got your applications. What do you do to get your arms around all the data that goes into that? The first bucket is file exposure management, understanding you've got files in your collaboration suite and file storage providers and messaging systems, every which way. How do you understand what's shared publicly, what's shared with people who no longer work at the business, what contractors maybe still have access to things, what is even just shared org-wide that shouldn't be? Getting your arms around that and then being able to manage that proactively is critical. Least privilege access, so making sure that your IT team has exactly the permissions they need to be successful in their role and nothing more. And finally, almost every company is held to some sort of compliance standards, whether self-imposed or by regulatory committees, different regulations like GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, you name it. BetterCloud helps and SaaS management platforms help on your journey towards maintaining and adhering to those security compliance standards. Now that all sounds great from a use case standpoint, but let's talk a little bit about the business outcomes that are driven by BetterCloud and SaaS management platforms. BetterCloud has on average a 3.4x ROI and a payback period of less than 1 year. That means you're going to get up solving these use cases faster than other platforms out there. Now, tactically, what this results in for your business and your organization is an 18 times faster delivery of employee offboarding, employee changes, onboarding tasks by leveraging BetterCloud for automation and enablement. A 2x increase in the speed needed to solve IT tickets. That's your front-end support team tackling twice as many tickets in the same time period by leveraging BetterCloud. And a 90% reduction in the effort and time needed around just managing security across your SaaS applications. That's SaaS data security, a 90% reduction in time. So how do teams do that? Well, I position that ultimately you need to have your organizations go from reactive to proactive to strategic. And we'll talk about how BetterCloud helps companies, regardless of where they are in this journey, achieve some of those goals. But let's start with a couple definitions. When I say reactive IT teams, what I mean is when IT is seen predominantly as a back office function. Work ultimately is done on a per ticket basis. A ticket comes in, your help desk team does some manual work, solves the ticket, goes back out in the world. That's been what we've seen up until more recently. IT teams that become a little bit more proactive are starting to embed themselves in business units, in specific departments to tackle specific projects or initiatives. And they've started to leverage automation and different types of tooling in their efforts to achieve those goals. Truly strategic IT teams are when IT is driving the business as a whole forward. Your IT teams have a seat at the executive table. Their goals are mapped to OKRs. They are making data-driven business decisions to help increase revenue, reduce costs, and reduce risk. That is what strategic IT teams are doing, and we'll go into now how BetterCloud, as the leading SaaS management platform, helps you not only achieve and adhere to some of these goals and trends that are happening, but bring you towards that strategic end of this spectrum in the process. So let's take a look at this through the lens of a couple use cases. So first and foremost, end user experience. And more specifically, let's talk about a new employee joining your organization. Ultimately, what we see for reactive IT teams, an end user joins, a new employee joins, and their given via manual process from your IT team access to their device and a few of the core apps that they need. What that means, though, is that new employees are not fully effective in their roles for an extended period of time, and they need to open tickets for other needs. That creates more manual work, more tickets to solve for reactive IT teams. As IT teams become more proactive, what we start to see is that end users have the apps they need to have when they need them. We see applications being given out more department specific, leveraging some automation or scripting to get there. So sales has sales apps, engineering has engineering apps, et cetera. And then for the long tail, there's still some manual work involved where end users are needing to open up tickets, but we're starting to shorten the amount of time needed for your end users to be proactive and productive, in their role. Now, truly strategic teams have a seamless interaction with IT, and IT gets the perception that they deserve as a business enabler. That same employee joining the business has access not just to their devices, not just their apps, but all the files and folders they need in their role. Maybe the calendars, they're in the right groups, they're in the right channels, they've got the right settings so that when they show up on day one, they have everything they need to start being successful in their role. When you talk about IT having a seat at that table and driving the business forward, if every single employee is getting up and running in their role sooner, that is a truly huge value that is given back to the business due to the strategic work of an IT team and leveraging, in this case, BetterCloud as the leading SaaS management platform. So let's talk a little bit about how BetterCloud can help here. For those of you familiar, this is BetterCloud's workflow builder. For those of you not, it follows a fairly straightforward when, if, then series of logic. But we pull in a huge amount of context from all your different SaaS applications to create a process similar to what you see here, where maybe your HR team is opening up a ticket in your ticketing system, and BetterCloud is listening for exactly that and giving this user who's joining the business access to all their apps, all their files that they need, their calendars, their groups, the right settings with the right approvals and the right notifications, and closing out that ticket that was opened so that you have a truly seamless automated experience for your end users. It's the best way to start your work at a new company, is to feel like you are taken care of on day one. And that is a huge benefit IT can bring back to the business. Now let's talk about our next use case, zero trust. So when we look at a reactive team here, what ultimately reactive teams will find, as will all teams, is that when you've got this increase in number of SaaS applications, you'll come to realize that there's no central visibility. Data exists everywhere, and that problem is just getting exponentially more difficult to solve. So when a problem arises, ultimately there's a fire drill to solve it ASAP. And that fire drill halts everything else that those teams were working on to go fix it. That is not an efficient way to run things, and more importantly, not secure. To have to manually go and chase down these types of risks or issues or incidents is time consuming, and that leaves potentially data exposed for longer than it needs to. Now, when teams become more proactive, what we ultimately see is that they've begun to set org-wide policies, I'll call it, where they have some blanket one-size-fits-all actions, which ultimately help prevent some of the worst outcomes. But on the flip side of that, they can hinder productivity. And so this, again, is where we're starting to see a more proactive approach from IT teams, where they're leveraging tools to reduce a large amount of risk. But when we look at what a strategic IT team does, they've made sure to analyze, using BetterCloud in this case, who are the right people to have access to the right information at the right time, and how do we set the right policies to manage and secure that data. So what we found is a much more tailored approach, where users in more sensitive departments or at more sensitive levels, or who have more sensitive data, have stricter policies, whereas users that maybe don't have that and need more, call it external collaboration or more access to share, are not hindered. That is how a strategic IT team is balancing a secure zero trust approach with business productivity. When we look at how BetterCloud helps that, we're looking here at an example of a content scan across all the different files you've got access to. BetterCloud is able to run policies, in this case, looking for things like driver's licenses, passports, social security numbers, just 100 different data identifiers we offer out of the box, giving you that visibility into where does your most sensitive data exist, and then how do we take this and, using that same workflow builder we looked at earlier, begin to automate and begin to proactively monitor and manage risk in the business. The final use case we're going to cover is around IT efficiency. So when we look at a reactive team, and we've talked about a bit of this so far, their work is ticket-based, it's manual, it's repetitive. The outcome of that is that it's also error-prone, and it leads towards more complex auditing down the line. If I have to manually do work in app 1, app 2, app 3, app 10, et cetera, that is a very complex, convoluted string to try and put together if I ever need to go back and look at what happened. So what we see proactive teams doing is ultimately beginning to leverage different automation tools, starting to use scripting in some places, and reserving that manual work for the long tail of what comes. This does a great job at expediting some of the response time for end users, which is obviously great for their experience, but still provides some difficulty when you need to audit later on, and still requires manually intervening and running scripts here, using automation there. So it's not as efficient as strategic IT teams have things. And what they have is ultimately zero-touch automation, and they're focused on a single stream flow between the end user and the audit. And what I mean by that is you have an end user opening a ticket regardless, and it could be a member of HR because someone new is starting or leaving. It could be someone who needs access to something new, or some name change or promoted, whatever it may be. What BetterCloud allows you to do is take that ticket. BetterCloud handles all the work associated with it, whether you're automating it, whether you're taking actions in a one-off or bulk basis within BetterCloud, saving you time in the process, and then keeping that audit log all within that single stream. That allows you to ultimately have a single place that is not just where work is being done for your IT teams, improving efficiency that way. It's a single place where automation is being done, and it's a single place for your audit logs. This is the nirvana, if you will, in automation, and this is what we see the truly strategic IT teams leveraging. So we take a look at how BetterCloud makes that possible. Our templates, we've got experience working with over 1,500 to 2,000 customers, and we've learned over that time what makes best-in-class automation work. What are the right steps to do this as deeply and thoroughly as possible? And so by leveraging templates, by leveraging BetterCloud's audit log, by leveraging BetterCloud's roles, you have that single stream between the end user and the audit. And BetterCloud is that centerpiece making it all possible. So I want to leave you all with a couple key takeaways. As we talked about in the beginning, there's a large focus between IT end users on ultimately improving the employee experience, adhering to zero trust, and improving efficiency across the board. If IT teams really want to make that possible and really want to focus on those areas, they need to become more strategic. BetterCloud's visibility, BetterCloud's automation, and BetterCloud's insight and expertise ultimately allows your organization and organizations of all sizes, verticals, et cetera, become strategic and bring true impact back to the business. Thank you all for your time.